The gravlifts hummed their usual tired song. Deep you went, deeper than anyone had gone before. The colony on Xylos needed more tellurium. Your job was simple. Scan the deep rock, find the veins, report back. But the scanner was screaming about something else. Not metal, not any known element. It was a life sign, a signal so vast it broke the machine's scale. Your light cut through the gloom. It illuminated a chasm floor that should not exist. The mining charts showed solid bedrock for another 1,000 meters. But here it was, a space so large your beam could not find the other side. And in the center of that impossible space, it rested. It was a shape of polished obsidian. It was bigger than the colony's central habitat, bigger than any starship you had ever seen. You stood on the precipice, a tiny figure against a geological titan. It was asleep. You could feel its slumber in the stillness of the air. The deep rock around you was warm to the touch. It was not geothermal heat. It was something else, a slow, steady pulse of life. Your comm crackled with the overseer's voice. You ignored it. Something down there held you captive. It was an echo in the chasm, a question waiting for an answer. You began your descent. You used your own gear, not the colony's loud machinery. Hand over hand, you rappelled into the immense darkness. The air grew warmer. The silence grew deeper. The only sound was the scrape of your boots against the rock wall. Below you, the great form became clearer. It was not just black rock. It was a mosaic of interlocking plates, like the shell of some star-born beetle. Except this beetle was the size of a mountain. Your feet touched the chasm floor. The ground was smooth, almost glassy. You were standing before it now, a wall of sleeping biology that defied every law you knew. The warnings from the academy, the rules of first contact, they all felt small down here. They felt like the words of children cautioning kings. This was no mere creature. This was an artifact of creation itself, a piece of the universe's ancient heart. You reached out a trembling hand. Your gloved fingers brushed against the surface. It was not cold like stone. It was warm, like living skin. A low hum vibrated through your bones. It was not a sound your ears could hear. It was a feeling, a resonance that started in your chest and spread to every nerve. It was a query, a gentle, curious probe into your mind. You did not pull away. You pressed your palm flat against its star-forged skin. The hum deepened, a thrum of immense power held in perfect check. You felt no malice, no threat, only a deep and profound loneliness. A solitude that stretched back across ages you could not count. It was a feeling so pure it almost brought you to your knees. In that moment, you understood. This was not a monster. This was a prisoner, trapped in stone and sleep. And you had just knocked on the door of its cage. Your comm unit burst to life. It was Elder Corin. His voice was sharp with fear and anger. He had seen your life signs go off the grid. He knew you had broken protocol. He demanded your immediate return. You looked up from the magnificent creature, back toward the tiny point of light that was the mine entrance. The world of rules and orders felt a universe away. But you knew you had to go back. For now. The journey up was a blur. The Elder Council was waiting for you in the main chamber. Their faces were grim. Elder Corin stood in the center, his robes of office seeming too big for his small frame. He did not ask for your report. He gave a decree. The chasm was to be sealed. The creature you found was a deep threat, an anomaly that endangered the entire colony. He called it the sub-level Titan, a name meant to inspire fear. He spoke of star plagues and world enders. His words painted a picture of a monster from the void, one that would consume them all if awakened. You tried to speak. You tried to explain the gentle hum. You tried to describe the profound sadness you felt from it. They silenced you with a wave of a hand. Their fear was a wall you could not breach. They forbade you from returning to the chasm. They declared the entire sector off limits, under penalty of exile. You were grounded. Your scanner was confiscated. You were a child who had touched a hot stove, and the elders were determined to protect you from getting burned again. But they did not understand. It was not a fire you had touched. It was a soul. You waited for the third moon to rise. Its faint silver light was your signal. The guards at the lower levels were lazy during the midnight shift. They trusted the automated locks. They did not expect a colonist to be foolish enough to defy a direct order from the council. But you were not just any colonist anymore. You were an accomplice to a secret sleeping in the heart of the world. You slipped past the energy gates. You moved through the silent mining tunnels. Your only light was a small hand lamp. You had no scanner this time. You did not need one. You could feel the creature. Its presence was a faint warmth in the cold stone, a silent call that guided you back to the chasm's edge. You made the descent again, this time with more confidence, with more purpose. When you reached the floor, something was different. The chasm was not dark. A soft, internal light pulsed from within the Titan's great shell. It was a gentle luminescence, a shifting tapestry of blues and greens. You stepped closer, mesmerized. The light was not random. It formed patterns, complex geometries that swirled and danced across its skin. It was talking to you. You were sure of it. There were no words, no sounds. But the patterns of light spoke a language older than speech. They were whispers made of pure light. They pulsed in time with a slow, deep hum that resonated in your bones. It knew you had returned. It was showing you something. It was showing you its thoughts. The light patterns intensified. They wrapped around you, projecting images not onto the wall, but directly into your mind. You saw nebulae being born. You saw star systems forming like cosmic dust motes in a sunbeam. It was a history of the galaxy, played out for an audience of one. You were not just seeing it. You were feeling it. The awe of creation, the quiet joy of a billion suns igniting in the dark. Then the vision shifted. The light turned a deep, sorrowful crimson. You saw others like it, a race of star-born titans drifting through the void. They were gardeners of worlds. They were shepherds of young suns. They moved with a grace that defied their impossible scale. They were a species of living gods, and they were beautiful. This was not a monster. It was a memory of lost suns. The vision turned to war. Another race appeared. They were not of light and life. They were of shadow and cold metal. A fleet of geometric hunters, ships that drank the energy of stars. They tore through the gardens of the Titans. They shattered worlds. They extinguished suns. A silent, brutal war raged across millennia. The Titans fought back, their light turning into weapons of immense power. But they were too few. The hunters were a swarm, a locust plague that consumed everything. One by one, the great light shepherds fell. Their final songs were explosions of novas. Their bodies became the dead husks of asteroids. The vision focused on one, the last one, your Titan. It fled, wounded and alone. It fell into the gravity well of a young, forgotten star. It burrowed deep into the crust of a lifeless planet. A planet that would one day be called Ilos. And there it slept, To heal, to hide, to remember. The vision faded. The light on its skin softened to a gentle blue. You were left breathless, shaking. The weight of its loss, its solitude, was a heavy burden on your soul. This was not a threat to your colony. It was a refugee, the last survivor of a genocide that had scoured the galaxy clean. You looked at the sleeping giant with new eyes, not with fear, not with awe, but with compassion. You knew what you had to do. Trust had to be a two-way street. The colony had rare power crystals. They were used to fuel the habitat's atmospheric shields. Each one held the energy of a small star, condensed into a perfect glowing gem. Stealing one was a serious crime. But what were the colony's rules compared to the pain of this ancient being? It was not even a choice. You made the journey back to the surface. It was harder this time. Your purpose felt heavy. You bypassed the security on the power conduits. The crystal you took was small, no bigger than your fist. But it pulsed with a warm, steady energy. It was a dangerous thing to carry. If it ruptured, it would vaporize half the colony. You handled it like a newborn bird. Perhaps that was not a bad analogy. It was an offering of life. Back in the chasm, the Titan's light was a soft, welcoming glow. You approached it without hesitation. You placed the glowing crystal on its skin. "This is for you," you whispered. The words felt small, inadequate. But the intent was clear. It was an offering of simple trust, a gift from a short-lived creature to an eternal one. You hoped it would understand. The Titan's hum deepened in response. The power crystal began to glow brighter. Its energy was being drawn into the great being, like water into a sponge. The light on its skin shifted. It offered you something in return. Another vision flooded your mind. But this was not of the past. It was of the future, a possible future. You saw your colony, thriving, expanding, not just on Xylos, but on other worlds. You saw human starships, sleek and fast, plying the star lanes. They were not ships of war. They were ships of discovery. And on the command deck of the largest ship, you saw yourself, older, wiser, and beside you, a shimmering blue light, the presence of your friend. It was a promise, a future of partnership, a future of hope. The beautiful vision dissolved, like smoke in the wind. It was replaced by something else, a new feeling, not from the Titan, but from the edge of the system. It was a cold, sharp spike of dread. The Titan's light flickered, from a peaceful blue to a warning yellow. In your mind, you saw it too. A signal. A ship, no, a fleet, had just translated from faster-than-light travel. It was a shadow between worlds. The Titan showed you their design. The ships were jagged and angular. They were made of the same cold, dark metal from its memories. The hunters had found it. After all these millennia, they had finally tracked down the last survivor. They were coming. And they were coming for your friend. The ancient war was not over. It had just found its way to your quiet little world. The hunter's signal did not go unnoticed. On the surface, the colony's long-range sensors blared to life. Alarms echoed through the habitat. Elder, Corin's face appeared on every public screen. His expression was one of terror and grim satisfaction. "I warned you," he said to the panicked colonists. His voice boomed with authority. "The sub-level Titan has called its masters. It has doomed us all." He did not know the truth. He could not comprehend it. In his fear, he saw only confirmation of his own dark theories. The colonists, scared and confused, believed him. Panic turned to anger. Mobs formed in the common areas. They chanted for action. They demanded the monster in the deep be destroyed before its allies arrived. They saw the Titan not as a victim, but as the cause of this new danger. The council convened an emergency session. The vote was swift. There was no debate. They would use the colony's primary mining tool, a seismic charge, to collapse the chasm. They would bury the Titan under 100 million tons of rock. It was a desperate choice, born of terror. They believed they were saving themselves. They were actually signing their own death warrant. The hunters would not be stopped by a cave-in. You felt the decision in the Titan's trembling hum. It felt the colony's fear. It felt their murderous intent. But it did not grow angry. It only grew more sorrowful. It had slept for eons, only to awaken to the same hatred that had destroyed its kind. You would not let it happen. You would not let their fear win. You scrambled out of the chasm, your heart pounding with a new, fierce purpose. You reached the main mining deck, just as they were prepping the seismic charge. It was a massive device, a cylinder of metal and wires. The miners moved with grim determination. They were not evil men. They were just scared. They were protecting their families. Elder Corin stood on a gantry above them, directing the operation. He saw you push through the crowd. His face hardened. "Get out of the way, child," he commanded. His voice echoed in the cavernous room. "You have done enough damage. You did not listen. You ran past the guards. You stood on the edge of the deployment shaft, the deep hole that led directly to the chasm. You spread your arms wide. You were a tiny, defiant figure against the massive machine, the child who stood defiant. "You don't understand?" You shouted. Your voice was small against the noise of the machinery. "It's not the enemy. It's trying to protect us." The miners paused. They looked from you to the elder. A flicker of doubt crossed their faces. But Corin's will was iron. "She is confused," he yelled, blinded by the creature's influence. "Do not listen. Fire the charge." A miner hesitated, his hand on the launch control. He looked at you, a child standing alone against the fury of the entire colony. You held his gaze. You did not flinch. In that moment, you were its only shield. You were the only thing standing between their raging fear and the last of a noble race. "Please," you whispered. "Don't." The miner looked away. He pressed the button. The seismic charge dropped into the shaft. A countdown appeared on the main screen. 10, 9, 8. You closed your eyes. You focused all your thoughts on the Titan below. A silent apology. A final goodbye. 7, 6, 5. The floor began to vibrate. 4, 3. You felt a new hum rise from the deep. Not of sorrow, not of sleep, but of power. 2, 1, 0. The charge detonated. A wave of force shot up the shaft, throwing you back. But there was no collapse, no shattering of rock. Instead, a column of brilliant blue light erupted from the hole. It hit the ceiling of the mining deck and spread out, forming a shimmering canopy of pure energy. The entire colony was bathed in its protective glow. The miners stared in stunned silence. The Titan finally awakens. Its power was not the rage of a wounded beast. It was the calm, controlled force of a master artisan. The seismic energy was absorbed. It was repurposed. The hum from the deep intensified, a planetary resonance that vibrated in everyone's soul. The Titan was no longer just a sleeping mountain. It was a conscious fortress, and its walls were made of light. Through your link, you felt its full awareness for the first time. It was a mind as vast as a nebula, as ancient as the stars, said it showed you the hunter fleet. They were entering the upper atmosphere now, Their weapons were charging, ready to sterilize the planet's surface. They had come to finish a job started long ago. They expected to find a wounded refugee. They did not expect to find it awake, and with a friend. The canopy of light above the colony thickened. It solidified into a shield that covered the entire region. The Titan's power was not for the colony. It was not an act of revenge against the people who had just tried to kill it. It was a shield raised against the true enemy, a shield raised against the darkness between worlds. The colonists below finally understood their mistake. Their intended victim was their only salvation. The true enemy revealed. The first volley from the hunter fleet struck the shield. The impact was silent. The energy weapons, capable of cracking continents, dispersed harmlessly across the blue energy field. The colonists watched on their screens, their fear turning into a disbelieving awe. Elder Corin fell to his knees on the gantry. Everything he thought he knew was wrong. His fear had almost doomed them all. Now the Titan needed you. Its power was immense, but its will had been dormant for ages. It was slow to react, like a waking giant. It needed a pilot, a guide, a mind that could move at the speed of human thought. You felt its request, not in words, but in a surge of pure potential. It was offering you the controls. You closed your eyes and took them. Your mind merged with its own. You were no longer just a child in a mining deck. You were the command center of a living weapon. You could feel every inch of its star-forged skin. You could direct its boundless energy with a single thought. It was a duet of will and power. Your emotions became its targeting system. Your courage became its strength. Let's show them what light can do, you thought. The Titan responded. Lances of pure energy, brighter than a sun, erupted from the ground. They were not aimed at the colony. They shot past the shield and into the sky. They moved with impossible precision. They were not clumsy mining tools. They were surgical strikes of cosmic force. One lance struck a hunter vessel. The ship did not explode. It simply dissolved. Its atoms were unwritten from the laws of physics. Another lance cut a second ship in half. The two pieces drifted apart, their internal systems dead. The hunters returned fire, a storm of plasma and kinetic rounds. They beat against the shield like rain on a window pane. You held it firm with your will. You felt the Titan's ancient energy flowing through you, tireless and infinite. Together, you met the hunters in a battle of legends. You were David, and your sling was a mountain. You guided the light lances with instinct and emotion. You anticipated their moves. You felt their cold, empty hatred through the void. It only fueled your resolve. The Titan's sorrow was gone, replaced by a fierce, protective fire. A fire that you now commanded. The battle raged for what felt like an eternity, and for only a moment. One by one, the hunter ships were dismantled. They were erased. They were broken against a power they could not comprehend. The final hunter ship, the command vessel, tried to flee. It turned toward the darkness of space. But a single, impossibly bright beam of light reached out and touched it. The ship vanished, and then there was only silence. The blue shield over the colony dissolved into soft motes of light that drifted down like snow. The energy lances faded away. The hum from the deep receded back into a gentle thrum. The battle was over. On the surface, the colonists emerged from their habitats. They looked up at the sky, a sky now clear of enemies. They looked down at the ground, the source of their salvation. And they could only stare in the silence of utter awe. You collapsed to the floor of the mining deck. The link was still there, but it was no longer a torrent of battle data. It was a calm, steady connection. You could feel the Titan's quiet gratitude, and it could feel yours. The miners who had tried to launch the charge now stood around you, not with anger, but with reverence. They did not see a disobedient child. They saw the pilot of a god. Your mind was permanently changed. It was expanded, entwined with the consciousness of the Ancient One. You could feel its thoughts as your own. Its ancient knowledge was now accessible to you. You were no longer just a human, and it was no longer just a beast. You had become its voice, its connection to the fast-paced world of smaller beings. And it had become your body. The mind and the mountain were now one. Elder Corin approached you. He did not speak. He simply removed his elder's sash and laid it at your feet. It was an act of surrender, an admission that the colony's old ways were done. They had been saved by the very thing they feared, and they had been led by the very child they had dismissed. A new order was dawning on Xylos, but you knew this world was no longer your home. The hunters were just a symptom. The disease was still out there, the cold, consuming darkness that had taken the Titan's family. Your job was not over. It was just beginning. The Titan's hum resonated with your own thoughts. It was ready to leave. It had slept for long enough. Slowly, majestically, the chasm began to widen. The ground trembled as the Titan rose. It pushed aside 1 billion tons of rock as if it were dust. It emerged into the sunlight for the first time in millennia. A mountain of shimmering, star-forged skin. Its light now a brilliant, hopeful gold. The colonists watched, not in fear, but in wonder. They were witnessing the birth of a legend. You walked to the base of the newly risen Titan. A ramp of pure light extended down to you. You walked up it, not looking back. Your place was no longer with the colony. Your place was with your friend. As you stepped onto its body, you felt a sense of homecoming. You were leaving the small world of Xylos behind for the great, star-filled dark. A human child and an ancient beast. A new legend is born. Together, you rose into the sky. A new constellation on a journey to bring the light back to the shadows.